I welcome back all to the 16th National Convention of the ONGC. It's been a day of very informative, intense, and engaging discussions so far. We hope all our participants, guests, and attendees are finding great value in the engagement so far. It's time for us to talk about the role of innovation and ecosystem partnerships in scaling up the Sustainable Development Goals. Innovation helps us find new pathways and breaks the monotony. It infuses a breath of fresh air and gives new perspective. We have an elite panel today with us to discuss Target 2030, role of innovation and ecosystem partnerships in scaling the SDGs in our third deep dive session of the day. And in this elite panel, I welcome Dr. Thomas Becker, Vice President, Sustainability and Mobility Strategy, BMW Group, Dr. Jatinder Singh, Assistant Secretary General, PhD CCI, Mr. Anurag Sharma, Director Onshore ONGC, and Mr. Gagandeep Bhullar, Founder and CEO, Superhuman Race. I also welcome our moderator of this session, Mr. Anurag Pratap. He's Vice President and CSR Leader, Capgemini. Over to you, Mr. Anurag.
Thank you, Richa. And this is privilege to be part of this panel where I can see various people with huge amount of wisdom and huge amount of experience in this particular field joining in to talk about how we can better our journey to achieve the SDGs. The Sustainable Development Goal under the UN 2030 agenda represent a shared vision for global development towards a sustainable economy, society, and environment. Various governments have started to coordinate national efforts and evaluate performance against the SDGs. But the recent studies also says very clearly that there is a huge amount of, I'll say, a disconnect between public with private, and there is a huge space available for people to join hand, collaborate, and bring innovation to ensure that the societal needs and the requirements of the wider communities are met. To fill this gap, it also to fill the gap of, I'll say, disconnect which is there. There is a requirement of public sector to work effectively with the social sector and to enlist the enormous capacity of the private sector. There is a need to create new models designed to bring in the public, private, and social sector together in support of the SDGs, including encouraging companies to use their formidable resources and scale to address societal issues and mobilize new sources of capital. And I am privileged to have people from, I'll say, all the four pillars joining me in discussing some of the elements, some of the questions that are very relevant, very pertinent in the journey. And that's where I'll start with Mr. Becker. And the question to you, Mr. Becker, is that how industries can utilize advancement in tech and innovation to accelerate their SDGs? How can these innovations be shared across industries?
Right. So thank you very much, first of all, for the kind invitation to be part of this important event and this panel. And as you rightly say, we have to clearly look beyond a sectoral and a corporate view, namely if we look at the Paris Agenda. And this has many different facets, which all have to come to play together. First, if you look at the electrification of the drivetrain and the transition to a CO2-free mobility, you have on the one side suppliers like us, the people who make the cars, but the speed at which we can move depends on framework conditions beyond our control. Infrastructure for charging, the kind of energy that goes into the grid, which determines the footprint of the usage of our product. With fossil fuels, this footprint is always the same. With electrification, it is changing depending on the energy mix. So the energy agenda and the mobility agenda get closely intertwined, but they have been silos in the corporate world as much as in policymaking for the last 100 years. So this is one aspect. The other one is, if you are really serious about your complete CO2 footprint as a company, you have to look into your value chain. So for an electric vehicle, the footprint would go up in the absence of measures taken. And we will launch 3 models within the course of next year, within the next 6 months, the fully electric Mini, the fully electric BMW iX and i4. So the footprint of this vehicle is defined by the material that goes into them, the batteries, steel, aluminum. And if you would just do nothing, it would grow. We have to turn that around and reduce our value chain footprint compared to where we are today. And that means a very close collaboration with our suppliers, with their suppliers, with the raw material producers. And again, it is about the energy that they use. For example, in aluminum, which is highly energy intense, uses a lot of electricity. So the question, where does the electricity come from, also reaches us via that angle. And this again means the transition of the automotive industry is to a very large extent about working in a cross-sectoral manner, questioning the policy silos we have today, collaborate between those who together define at the end of the day the CO2 impact of the kilometer that our customers drive with our products.
You're very, very, I feel this is very important because it can't be just one player influencing the whole agenda. It needs to be collaborative. It needs to be a space where everyone chips in with the expertise that they have, bring in the knowledge that they have, and influence the larger ecosystem in achieving the SDGs, and which is something which is needed and required in all our discourses. Coming to you, Mr. Sharma, and this is linked to some of the point that Mr. Baker was talking about on how some of the policies need some amount of revisit. There are some policies which needs strengthening, and there are some policies which needs, I'll say, support from all across the larger ecosystem. The question to you, or I'll say the input that I'll seek from your side is primarily on what are some of the key policy measures which were already taken by government or are needed to complement industry efforts to accelerate SDGs. Mr. Sharma?
I'm sorry, I couldn't get that question. Could you repeat that?
The question is that looking at the effort that various companies are making, and also the effort that government is making on ensuring that the ecosystem is getting strengthened to achieve the larger mandate that we have under SDGs. What do you think are some of the policy measures that government need to take, or what are the various policy measures which are already in picture, which are strengthening the work that's happening in this particular space?
As far as SDGs are concerned, I think that the policy measures which need to be taken would require sustainable development, and the efforts, for example, the energy requirements of the countries are increasing, and they will continue to increase because the industrializing will increase, the population is going to increase, so the investments will continue to come. So in corresponding with the investments, so that our emissions are also controlled. So there have to be some incentives so that the companies can make investment as well as take measures to control the emissions. So the policy measures have to be in that direction.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, you're right. And coming to you, Mrs. Buller, if I can ask to further strengthen the work that the point that Mr. Sharma was talking about on some of the policy work that government has already taken. You're part of various networks. You're part of some of the alliances also, which is these days talking in a very, very I'll say structured manner on building coalition or building a network to address some of the policy gaps or bring in the element to further strengthen the policy results that is being taken by government. If I ask you, what are the two key policy issues that these days government is really talking about to accelerate the journey on the SDGs?
So thanks, Anurag. I think this is a very interesting question. And I think rather than focusing on, what the government is either asking for or not, I think, we can, based on both the speakers that spoke before me, so Thomas as well as Anurag, I think they both sort of talked about energy in particular. With the SDGs, what is really interesting is that it's a common set of problems with a common toolkit of solutions. Now, in terms of policy intervention, what is really interesting is that governments around the world are moving towards greater emphasis on reporting and disclosures. And I think that is very, very important. Obviously, the more data is available in terms of reporting and disclosures, the better informed the customer or the citizen is. But I think that one thing that, so out of the two things, the one most important thing that governments around the world should be thinking about is transparency. Reporting does not necessarily mean transparency, right? Just because I go ahead and publish a 100-page report on what my company is doing with regards to sustainability, or I have a label that says that this is, what the composition of my product is, it does not mean that the consumer is going to understand anything about how my company is placed, right? And as governments, I think that responsibility is actually far greater because they are not a profit-making entity, right? They have to look out for citizens. This way to look out for citizens around the world, so the global citizen, is the SDGs. So, there are these environmental parameters and, energy discourse that Thomas and Anurag contributed to, the energy mix is changing. So an electric vehicle's footprint is variable depending on the location that you're in. Anurag talked about the fact that the country needs to move towards, a better mix of energy as a nation. But how do we sort of, with the common citizen, how do we sort of empower them to make buying decisions based on this, so that businesses are in turn, sort of almost in a way, they're soft pedaling towards a more sustainable existence because that's what the customer is demanding. So that's, I think, the number one, and it's nearly any government around the world is probably not thinking about this right now, but I think we need to do it. And then the second thing that I think that governments could, in terms of a policy intervention, play a greater role in. So I think that we are constantly sort of, as governments, innovating on policy in terms of, guidance on setting better standards in a way, right? So this needs to be the standard for education, for human rights, labor, energy, and so on. But there's nearly no benchmarking that happens that sort of flows down through it, right? So in terms of, so the government is setting these standards, and then the benchmarks that do exist are usually unmonitored and independent, right? What that actually does is that everybody's coming up with their own metrics, benchmarking based on those metrics. And so the results of every benchmarking exercise are actually, from my perspective as a consumer, usually in favor of the entity that is sponsoring the benchmarking exercise. It could be an independent company, it could be a coalition, and so on. So I think that some part of the benchmarking needs to be sort of done through a concerted exercise. And that's another policy intervention that I think would be useful in times to come, where, we are setting these common metrics, common standards, and then, we are measuring performance strictly against those, right? And any innovations that exist will then sort of also cater to them, and, sort of, they would, I do think as a citizen, I would want that information in that format to be able to make sense of it.
No, I can understand that there is a huge amount of need for transparency, data, how authentic you are as far as your reporting is concerned, bringing in benchmarking as something which is very relevant in the whole journey of checking the progress that we are making. Not just within our own industry, but also in the larger ecosystem in which we are operating. Thank you, Ms. Bulla, for your opinion on this. And coming to you, Dr. Singh, linked to what Ms. Bulla was talking about on the whole effort to bring in, I'd say, benchmarking as a project which is not just looking at the data and numbers, but also what is called using that as a tool to influence consumer and consumer behavior. The question to you is that how in your opinion, ecosystem partnership, as you're part of, I'll say, industry led larger alliance, our ecosystem partnership can play a key role in exchange of knowledge, exchange of ideas and best practices, which will help the collaboration that is needed between public, private, and wider societal spaces. Lord Singh.
Thank you, Anurag, for this question, and thank you to GCNI for this opportunity. In fact, what I believe that there has to be a purposeful and effective leadership around the technology governance in different PPP models wherein we can deploy, and also there can be investment for private sector as well as public sector. I think that will be critical. So in terms of partnerships, it has been seen that governments and many private sector leadership is already driving and also harnessing the uptake of the advanced technologies, which is actually required to accelerate the action of global goals. And if we see, like taking the cue from Ms. Buller regarding benchmarking, I think we need to revisit STIP, that is Science, Technology and Innovation Policy 2020, in which PhD, Chamber of Commerce, Industry played a very important part. In fact, there is a standardized research and innovation excellence framework, again in partnership model, which is being formed, which is based on the international benchmarks. And this is being formulated to ensure the cohesive and transparent evaluation of all kinds of research and innovation. And in fact, this framework of benchmarking, this is actually going to set cross-country benchmarking tools, and this will actually position to assess the performance of all the key indicators of science, technology, and innovation using different set of indicators in terms of how we are progressing in SDGs, also like what all different patents are being developed and all other related knowledge products. And also, through this research and innovation excellence framework, again in different, public and private partnership models, the research quality is also be going to enhance using, talent pool throughout the international benchmarking exercise. We have seen that there are joint appointments across government that is happening between the academia, between industry. A lot of, collaborations are being set on national as well as international level. And this is being facilitated to actually have the best of people, best of the talent in this technology ecosystem for actually realizing the SDGs. Although we know that realizing SDGs by 2030 is definitely a very, very daunting task. But I'm sure that with the collective responsibility, with collective tool, with collective mentorship programs from industry as well as policy advocacy from government, and also by supplementing some of the incentivization mechanisms, it can actually guide and motivate the technologies and also the private sector as well as the development sector to actually go for some potential and actually do some sort of meaningful projects in order to realize all the 17 SDGs. And I'm sure that among all these SDGs, like SDG 4, which actually tells about the quality education, is a fountainhead for all L16 SDGs. Because if we see, like particularly in countries like Europe and also like in US, most of the the patents, most of the best of the products, they actually came out from the university system that is actually solving a lot of social issues, be it in terms of education or in health parameters or eliminating in poverty from a particular geography. So on the same line, if we are able to give a lot of thrust in terms of PPP models, particularly in education sector for enhancing quality education and vocational education, I'm sure that we'll be having some best of the cutting edge technology, which will be developed by the grounded people, by the grassroots workers, that can actually catapult in terms of realizing all of these 17 SDGs.
Thank you, Dr. Singh. And you talked about the public-private partnership, which is, I'll say, in today's context has become very important. Important because both the sector need to acknowledge the relevance, acknowledge the role that they play in building the larger good that we all are trying to build for societal gain and societal welfare. Coming to you, Mr. Sharma, the question linked to this, and I know ONGC has done a huge amount of work in building the public-private partnership. can you share some of the examples where the partnership which was developed led to a huge amount of improvement in some of the goals set in under SDGs?
I would just share some of the efforts which we have been taking. That one of the biggest example would be the CDM project we have undertaken in the form of OTPC power project, perhaps which is one of the largest project in terms of CERs which accrued to us. Besides that, there are 14 other projects which ONGC has, and we continue to add many projects over the years. If you are referring to specific projects, because we have been using we have been utilizing expert services. We have been utilizing services with companies like Schlumberger, Baker, Halliburton, and we have been improving our systems over the years. We have been endeavoring through these partnership in improving our energy efficiency. And if you talk in terms of sustainability, we endeavor to reduce our emissions in the form of identifying and reducing leakages, reducing flares to the minimum numbers. Then other measures we have been taking is utilizing services in the form of data analytics, which again increases our efficiency. We have utilized services of Schlumberger, for example, in Northeast, and we have developed a digital oil field, so which has automated our operations. So these are some of the examples which we are taking and which will continue to take to improve our energy efficiency and reduce emissions.
Thank you, and I'll come to you, Mr. Becker, on one question which is something which always come to my mind whenever I look at the effort that's happening in the area of, I'll say, how we can build in enlightened, well-aware, well-structured ecosystem to help achieve the SDGs. In your opinion, what kind of role think tanks or academia can play in shaping the way the discourse that's happening in the area of SDGs? What are the key effort that they should be bringing in along with industries to shape the discourses that's happening in this particular space?
Well, that's maybe I could highlight two very different aspects. One is about developing and testing technology. So, for instance, we have, together with the Erasmus University in Rotterdam, this is now an example from the Netherlands, developed a scheme where for the plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, which can drive with both electric as well as conventional drivetrains, we developed a system where whenever you enter a city center, where the issue of air quality is most pressing, the vehicle would automatically go into the electric mode. So this has been verified with a test group of customers in collaboration with the university and with the city administration. And we are now in the process of rolling that technology out into very many markets around the world in order to demonstrate that we seek to get the maximum benefit out of that technology. So this geofencing logic with customer incentives who get rewarded by points that they can then swap into, for example, charging volume, has been developed together with an academic institution. The other point refers to what Ms. Bulla has been saying. We have an intense debate at a global scale about the future roles of accountability and transparency at corporate level. And the very many institutions from many countries involved in process of international standard setting are certainly hugely important. And we are a globally operating company. We must and are strongly interested in global collaboration between these institutions, so that we do not have totally different reporting schemes between Europe, the US, India, China, you name it, but are consistent in our messaging and in the way how we develop our reporting systems further. So here I would also see an important field for academic insight, objective scientific assessment, and a good linkage to the corporate application, which needs to work properly, and where we need to also create the infrastructure, also on the data side, for example, so that we can really properly monitor our footprint, ideally from raw material extraction to the use phase of our vehicles in accordance with the Paris rulebook. So a lot of things to be done, I think, in a collaborative manner.
And that's where I'll take this question to Ms. Buller, because she has been part of some of the network. And when Mr. Becker was talking about bringing in collaboration, because different entities bring in different kind of expertise and which are needed to strengthen the whole effort on achieving the SDGs. What, in your opinion, is the key challenges to bring in the collaboration there, bring in the whole ecosystem on one particular platform to achieve the larger mandate, which is there as part of SDGs in front of us, Ms. Bulla?
So this has been such an interesting conversation. Actually, I'm just enjoying listening to it. But yeah, thanks for the question, Anurag. I think that the challenges from the point of view of every ecosystem player are in fact different. So I think that a large player, I used to work previously for the Boeing company. We have Thomas from BMW here. So for the large player, I think it is agility, right? So when you become a behemoth, it's hard to sort of move in a particular direction very, very quickly. For the smaller players, it is, for the most part, I think it's investment, right? So there's a lot of innovation, there's a lot of agility, there are new ideas, there's enthusiasm, energy. But, you know, I think that investment is a challenge for a lot of the smaller players. And then I think for the grassroots organizations that are working in non-profit, in the capacity of a non-profit organization, I think that sometimes the context is different, right? So that is also a challenge that we've observed with, so for example, I'll just take the example of, say, you know, solving for rural electrification, for example, in a country like India. Now, there are parts of India that have not had electricity since independence, right? For the last 70 years, they haven't had electricity in those small pockets of the country. Now, a nonprofit that's working for rural electrification is sort of working to an aspirational goal of providing electricity in terms of access to electricity, but the partner that they are working with is not only contextualizing that with, you know, SDG 7 in terms of, you know, access to electricity, but also sometimes in terms of, you know, what is the business that this opens in that market for their product, whatever their product may be, right? So I think that sometimes there's a little bit of a context disconnect with the grassroots players that are non-profits. And with, so, you know, it was really interesting to hear some of the thoughts on the collaboration with academia as well. My experience personally, while I was at Boeing and working with research groups from around the world, was that the intent with academicians usually is to make information available, so to publish papers, right, and to solve large problems in, you know, new ways. While for industry, I think it's to build products that are bought and consumed, right? So to become profitable. And I think that these sets of challenges are actually also our toolkit for a good ecosystem collaboration. How do you make sure that everybody wins, right? So, and I think we do have some use cases. They are not necessarily, so not necessarily for solving for the SDGs, but I think we do have some use cases for great ecosystem collaborations that end up solving global problems. So if we look at a platform like Uber, for example, right? So there are all these cars that are now getting bought because the drivers will benefit because they are on a platform. The users benefit because they pay as they use. So, you know, the average person in a large city that is able to afford a cab ride in an Innova or, you know, any car, even in a BMW, for example, may not be able to afford the BMW, but they can afford the car ride, right? So it's sort of benefiting the whole ecosystem. It is reducing poverty, unemployment, right? These people who have the skill to drive, but they could not be employed as full-time drivers, have that. It's reducing carbon footprint because of the share economy that is available. So I think that the challenges in the ecosystem also are sort of part of the solution. And I think we just need like a sort of go to the 30,000 feet view and then, look at the tapestry and then see how all the threads come together when we start building the solution.
Well, that's where the question is that which are the threads which are not coming together, and why they are not coming together? Because I'm not leaving you without getting I'll say the answer on these points, where the intent is to understand what is preventing us from coming together and making sure that collective might of public, private, and society comes in together to bring in the kind of change that we all are aspiring to bring in there.
I think, so, what is preventing us from coming together is, I think, trust, right? So all of these organizations view the same ecosystem differently. The outcome is different for each one of them. So there is a lack of trust, I think even with the coalition that you keep referring to, Anurag, with Namami Tate, the government wants to achieve some things, the industry wants to achieve some things, and the citizens want to achieve some things, and there's a lack of trust. And I think that trust gap can be plugged with transparency, information being available, and clarity across all the players that, this is what I contribute. Help me contextualize what I want, but also, I should be able to see the end line of how does this contribute to the larger objective. So I think trust is a big one. And I think the second one, which is always the case, is, all of these ecosystem partnerships to flourish, they require funding and mandate, right? And that formality is usually hard to accomplish also, but it needs to be in place.
No, thank you, and I'm glad that we are talking, and there's a need to talk about some of the challenges which are there to bring in the ecosystem together to really get the strength that each of the entities can bring in there in this particular fight. Coming to you, Dr. Singh, because you lead the industry in a number of ways. You bring the industries together. You bring in the might of industry together and the point that I'm borrowing from what Ms. Buller was talking about, or Mr. Becker was talking about, the whole ability to change, the whole ability to be agile, the whole ability to look at the larger picture, the whole ability to align one's growth story with the larger requirement that is there in SDGs. How the industry is ready and how industry is preparing itself to become ready in achieving the 2030 target that is there in front of us.
Right. Thank you, Anurag, for a good question. And in fact, also coming back to the question that you asked Ms. Buller regarding what prevents us. So I think, as rightly pointed by Ms. Buller, is about one is the trust factor. And secondly, over the top of it, I think this technology is again a very great enabler. We need to have digital footprints in each and every system, because more digital ecosystem brings in more transparency. And also in terms of policy, also in fact, from industry perspective, we have been hopping to academia, to Ministry of Education, that why not to go for something like soft PhDs. There are many people who are actually vying to go to the colleges and teach students, people who want to give back to society from the industry. But again, there is a roadblock. You need to be PhD to become an associate professor or a professor as such. So we have been, in fact, giving a very strong thirst for soft PhD people having 20 plus years of experience in industry. I'm sure the type of practical, wisdom and wealth they accumulate over the year of the practical experience, that maybe I am sure more than what is being, written in the books. And second, your question, coming back to your question in terms of how industry is prepared for this. Now, what happens, like industry of late, we have seen that, most of the projects, particularly everything boils down to, the finance part. Again, as pointed by Ms. Buller, it said everything boils down to money at the end of the day. So now what industry has realized that whenever they're going for any sort of, innovation or any, sort of a technology disruption, so it has been seen that since India being a large country and wherein, there are a lot of scope for experimentation, particularly in rural areas, we in fact talk of inclusive growth, we talk of sabka saath, sabka vikas, we talk of reaching the last mile, person. So over the period, we have seen, like in many boardroom discussions, it has been felt that the innovation and the technology, this should be for and by the people who are takers of this technology, and it can actually has the potential to address many of the challenges. And what has been seen that the advantage one can take from the existing resources and capabilities within the firms, it can actually develop very simple down to earth solution, and it can actually make services and products available that might otherwise be somewhat unaffordable. For example, you take the case study of Unilever Shakti, and in which it's a perfect blending of inclusive innovation with development sector networks, and also with the penetration of industry. Like Unilever again is a big industry. So this initiative, this shows that how pro-poor approaches can actually set up the networks between different important players. For example, there's an initiative. This is incorporated by the alliance between the Unilever and the Cooperative for Assistance and Relief Everywhere, which is known as CARE. And with this particular model, the company as well as the development sector is aiming to develop new distribution channels to reach the poorer consumers, or what we say the last mile person in small communities. And also it gives very low cost products like shampoo and like face cream and other things. And this also is providing a platform for women's training in the rural sector. Also it is actually developing entrepreneurship models within the rural networks. It is also actually directly actually helping to ease out the problems in the health sector, for sanitation, for even for the infant care also. So these micro funding things which is done by such models, they actually becomes harbingers for something big models, as we have seen, like microfinance models like in Bangladesh. So these are the things we need to look forward, and I'm sure that now, since everybody is looking for like customized product, customized care, it gone are the days when we used to say one umbrella fits all. Now in fact industry is going deeper and deeper. They're trying to understand the nuances of a particular demography and geography, and actually making products and services which actually serves the need of the people, and using their own internal resources. And the for example, we do a lot of projects in some of the rain deprived areas through our foundation. Along with the money that is being given in the CSR, we also take Shram Dan, and Shram Dan is nothing but actually the work that the local community do in order to build maybe a check dam, or they're developing any pond. So these collaborations and these models are actually bearing good results also. And I'm sure that with passage of time, since CSR is going to be one of the big models, and we are in fact harping on the industry that you need to reserve some of the CSR monies, some for some sort of frugal innovations, because frugal innovation is the thing that going to actually solve the local problem, the local issues and challenges that these rural communities are facing. And these models, again in PPP, here I will add another PPP, public private panchayat partnership models. So since India is a big rural community, I'm sure if panchayat is integrated in all the footprints of development and technology disruption, I'm sure we will actually see the result when all these SDGs will be totally manifested and realized. Thank you.
Lovely. We coined a new word, triple P, and there are, I'll say, there are 2P, 1C also, where public-private community partnership, the public-private panchayat community partnership. So glad to have these phrases coming in there, because that also talks about how relevant it is to bring in everyone there in this particular journey, because this journey is not you can't achieve the mandate without bringing everyone in this part of the journey, become a partner, become an equal partner. And as Ms. Buller said somewhere in this discourse, that it needs to be genuine, and the effort needs to be authentic, and it needs to be backed by some of the data there. I know, Mr. Sarma, there is a huge amount of work ONGC has done in the area of bringing in panchayat, become fulcrum of some of the change initiative that's happening at the community level, bringing in community at the center of some of the initiatives that's happening there, bringing in, I'll say, the change and transformation at the community level. the question that I really love to know on something that Dr. Singh was talking about, that how ONGC is supporting or encouraging innovation there in some of the societal work that they're doing, or the work that is facing societal need or aspirations. What kind of innovation that they are bringing in these initiatives?
One of the initiatives which we took some time back, I think it was about 2 years back, when the Prime Minister of India gave us a challenge under our startup initiative for developing a solar-based stove, so which we could successfully design. It was on the basis of a national competition, and this project is running successfully. We delivered such stoves to an entire village, and that is running successfully. And there is a scope of further improving this prototype and launch it on a commercial basis. So that is one. Besides that, we contribute a lot through our CSR schemes, and perhaps we are one of the largest in the country. And we contribute a lot towards education, towards environment. We take various projects. These are in variety of fields. I can name many of them. We have devised water saving schemes, rainwater harvesting, and we have our own joint venture called OTBL, through which we do soil remediation work. So we take up so many projects, and our budget is in the range of about 500 crores per annum. So this is, in summary, what we do.
No, that was one of the main reasons why I reached out to you, to understand some of the innovative work that's happening there, because ONGC is bringing huge amount of change at the grassroots level with the work that you are doing. Coming to you, Becca, on some of the points that other three panel members talked about, and I really want to get a more, I'll say, understanding on how BMW is supporting incubation of ideas, whether it's in area of renewable or area of your core business, or I'll say in the larger, as Dr. Singh talked about, the CSI space, how you are incubating some of the ideas and making sure that it gets aligned with other business growth strategy that you have there in place.
Well, there are several fields where we, if you like, tapping into fields where we have not been active in. So if you want to bring down the footprint of a car, today we have seen 20 years of increasing complexity of our product, meaning ever more connected, inseparable materials being put together. Recycling these is extremely difficult if you want to get material that is automotive grade quality. So aluminum that is mixed with copper will corrode. So you can maybe make a Coke can out of it, but not a car. So we are strongly at the moment looking into the pretty big community of startups that is developing new technologies in terms of materials, including nature-based material. And with the Vision vehicle we have been putting on display in September at the Munich Motor Show, we have been trying what is possible beyond the traditional material mix of a car, what you can do wood-based, how you can have seed materials made from mushrooms, from cactuses, from nature-based solutions. So I think there is a huge field out there of innovation that haven't been relevant for the automotive industry for the last 130 years, but which will have a significant impact. And we started this journey already in 2013 when we introduced the BMW i3, which includes KNAF, which actually comes from India, and where we have been working with suppliers and communities producing that raw material. So we want to continue on that journey, but clearly quality, market availability, and pricing are the challenges we need to overcome jointly with partners in an extending supply chain if we want to bring that about.
Interesting. And one more question that I'll be coming to you, Dr. Singh, is about in present context, what should be the role that government should be playing? Whether it should be an influencer, whether it should be setting the larger framework, it should be decider, or it should be, I'll say, an equal partner in the whole journey of building an ecosystem, bringing in people together, bringing in that trust that is missing, as Ms. Bulla said. What kind of role that government should be playing? Whether the old role plays will be good for them to play, or the changing world order or changing terms of reference should also change their role that they should be playing.
See, of late, we have seen like there is a lot of change dispensation with the government in terms of advocating different sort of models of partnership, and we are saying that the policies which used to take many years to change, now even the amendments are happening every month. For example, take the case of IBC. The amendments are in fact literally every month or 2 months we are seeing new packages, new schemes, different amendments. So I think the government has to be more rapid in terms of understanding the market ecosystems and connect the dots accordingly, because it's not only about the government being a regulator, but at the same time it has to be a sort of a strong supporter of change dynamics also. What we have seen particularly in technology sector, the technology is advancing very, very fast and the regulators are not able to catch up. For example, the drones, they came 10 years back, but the drone policy came only this year itself. So in between this space, a lot of scope, a lot of opportunity cost is being spent in terms of unleashing the potential of the new technology framework. And over period, we have seen that now, particularly with organizations like Niti Aayog, wherein they are hiring best of the talents, best of the consultants from, they have the best of the brains, the think tank. And I'm sure that with this new dispensation, particularly, most of the things are catching very fast. But at the same time, for example, we have examples. For example, the new education policy, it came after a lot of sort of brainstorming for the last 10 years. We are able to see the new education policy only last year. So more speed is required. And again, in terms of the transparency part, the government has to actually digitalize its products more and more. Particularly, blockchain technology can be one of the harbinger for more transparency. I'm not talking about bitcoins or cryptocurrency. Blockchain, particularly in land deals, particularly in public procurement, particularly in farm to fork policies, that can actually be a game changer. So we are seeing there's a lot of speed, particularly within the regulation space also, and I'm sure that with the new policies that government is making over the years at a very fast pace, wherein within a year the new regulation comes. I'm seeing even the industry is seeing that positively is happening, and of late we have seen the type the IIP is improving every quarter. Our GDP is also improving every quarter. So these market sentiments and the economic forces can actually is one of the you can say these are one of the the results which actually catapult to the growth in terms of the socio-economic development of the nation. And the government is doing their bit, and I'm sure that if the speed goes on with the same momentum, government will be able to catch up with the market forces, and we can see the regulation will be there and the technology will come later. Right now it is somewhat on the other side.
No, I agree with you. That there is a huge amount of there's a sense of urgency there, and there's a huge amount of, I'd say, pragmatism also in some of the steps being taken there. The question always is that is it enough? Should we do more? Should we make sure that we all are in the same room talking the same thing in a manner that we all can understand and we all can pool in our energy to achieve the larger ambition. Because 2030 is not that far. It's hardly a few years away, and there are, I'd say, goals and there are progress which is there in front of our own eyes, and we all can see where we are, and we all can see how much is needed. And that's where the question on whether the old ways of solving issues is good enough, or we should start investing in bringing out newer ways of doing things, bringing out innovation in areas, not in the area of manufacturing only, not in the area of services only, not in the area of, I'd say, product development only, but also in the area of how we are conducting ourselves, how we are aligning ourselves, how we are doing business together, how we are making sure that we build the trust and we work together. And that's where the whole the question on, are we really investing in innovation, or are we creating the culture of innovation within India, where we incentivize the effort on innovation, we incentivize the work that's happening on innovation, and then be ready to roll out the solutions which are coming out for the innovation journey. And that's the question that I'll be asking Ms. Buller based on some of the work that you have done in this particular space.
So this is a very good question, and I think, sort of building on what Dr. Singh started saying, I just sort of, build on what he's already said, right? So historically, government has been slow to respond, and you're right, Anurag, we need to start thinking about, is the government still sort of, expected to be the policy maker, or do they now become like an equal partner or another role, right? So one of the things that comes to my mind is that, with governments around the world, one of the things that needs to happen is that they need to be the facilitator of dialogues, right? And these dialogues need to happen with stakeholder groups. In some cases, those stakeholder groups will be corporate organizations that are large and operational, in that particular segment. And just like, so in this talk, Thomas has talked about so many products that BMW has envisaged. We are looking at a cactus throne on the BMW, right? Instead of like historically what has been like a regular seat. It's exciting, right? And not every product that is launched by every company is successful. And I think governments need to accept that. It takes us 10 years to build a policy because we want the policy to be perfect. But in 10 years, the world has changed, right? The policy is obsolete even before it goes live. So I think that, when you become a facilitator of dialogues where, various stakeholders are involved, you push things out of the door and you keep adapting and evolving as you go along. So you miss some things, but the broad base of everything is covered. And I think that it does help in sort of, generating greater trust across these stakeholder groups also, because now, you're working together. So the government can never be, in my opinion, an equal partner, because they are still, sort of setting the guidance for what all of us are supposed to do in terms of reporting, operating, and so on. But I do think that they can become efficient in what they do by, sort of creating these forums where ideas are exchanged, and, they can stay up to speed on where the industry is at, where the panchayat is at, where the citizens are at, and, where we need to head as a world in order to achieve the SDGs.
No, I completely agree. They can be, I'll say, first among the equal. There's no denial of the fact, and they are. They look at the might, look at the strength, look at the, I'll say, the reach that they have in all possible sense. There's a huge amount of merit in making sure that everyone is heard, everyone's voices get accounted for, and every possible solutions are then look from the angle of how effective it will be in achieving some of the goals which are there in front of us. It's very pertinent to also get into the whole debate on, should we wait for a perfect solution, or should we start with whatever is there in our hand to do it, and then be pragmatic, be flexible to change whenever you are required to change. And that's a question that I always ask people. if you ask me personally, that I'm a firm believer that there's nothing called perfect. You need to what is called because what is perfect for 2020 may become highly imperfect in 2022. And what was needed in 1998, if you deliver that in 2008, then you have missed out the point, because 2008, the requirement will be something else there. And that's where it's very, very relevant to look at timely responses rather than a perfect response, because timely response may number of cases may not be adequate, but it will certainly solve some of the problems which are there. And that's the last question that I'll come to you, Mr. Becker, on when you design the innovation, or when you look at who all can be part of the larger puzzle that you want to solve, are you looking for a perfect one, or are you okay with the something which is close to perfect?
Well, as a premium manufacturer, we always try to be as close to perfection as we can. But what perfection means is massively changing.
Yeah.
And not only on the big issue of what drivetrain technology will drive us in 15 years from now, but also when it comes to what sustainability means for a car maker, where you have very different interpretations of the very same thing between markets like Denmark or India or the United States. So we can't do everything in one way. And the idea that is sometimes floating around that there is just one scenario when the world is happy and perfect in 20 years, it may be, let's say, a guiding idea, but in the meantime, we have to invest into the flexibility for things developing differently from that, and to invest into the ability to adapt to things not developing as we think today. We have to remain open to innovation that we don't know today, while at the same time having instruments where we can demonstrate that we are moving ahead the right way. And what Dr. Singh said about blockchain is very true for our value chain. We are investing heavily together with many corporate partners in the ability to track the footprint of parts, subcomponents, components that go into the car in order to have the technology that enables transparency. So there are things that we are sure are well spent money today, but at the end of the day, the world is not deterministic. And this is why investing in the ability to be resilient, to be flexible, to remain innovative, and not nail ourselves into just one scenario that we may believe in today and which may be totally wrong in 3 or 4 years from now. I totally share that perception. I
completely agree with you that there is nothing called static in the world. You need to be dynamic. You need to be what is called, because situation is changing, and earlier it was taking time to change, but today it's changing pretty fast. I know we have last 2 minutes left, and I know that I can speak for another 5 minutes to summarize the discussion there. But knowing the kind of wisdom that is there in this particular panel, can I ask all of you to spend the last 20 seconds and to give the final headline from your side? What it will take to build the ecosystem which will enable us to achieve the SDGs much quicker than 2030. The headline one.
So from me, it is make it worth everyone's while.
Okay. And Dr. Singh?
For me, it is the technology, and technology is going to be the game changer in this entire ecosystem, and more technology infusement in the entire value chain. I'm sure that we'll be able to achieve all these things.
And coming to you, Mr. Sharma, we share the same first name.
Yeah, that's why sometimes I was wondering whom you're addressing.
Which Anurag they're talking about, huh?
So once again, I also agree that technology has to be the way to go, more innovations and more efficiency in our operations to reduce emissions.
And coming to you at very large, but the work that you are doing is very, very important. What will be your headline from your side, Mr. Becker?
Well, it's all about innovation. It's about being ready for change, and it is about for upskilling people.
And I'll take the last 20 seconds to say that to build the ecosystem to really deliver, we need to be as authentic as possible. We need to be as genuine as possible. We need to be as willing to work together in co-creating a world where there is space for everyone to achieve what they really wish to achieve. Thank you. It was lovely interacting with all four of you. Thank you for the wisdom that you brought in there. Thank you for some of the, I'll say, some of the words and terms that you used. And this will go in enriching the whole discourse on how we can create the ecosystem to deliver, to achieve the SDGs as quickly as possible, rather than waiting till 2030. Thank you. Over to you, Richa.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Anurag. Thanks a lot for this very meaningful and eye-opening discussion full of wisdom, as you rightly said. Collective effort along with commitment to SDGs can help hasten our journey towards Target 2030. With this, I thank all the esteemed participants in this panel who took time out for this discussion and came to this forum. Thanks again for sharing your time.